Hi, piano teaching class. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today, but I'm glad we'll have one more day together this semester on Thursday in person. I just want to remind you all of the policy, the studio policy assignment. And as a little tip, usually I see too many words in policies. I think the goal is to put forward your expectations, but also to make it readable so that your families and your parents will be wanting to read it and knowing the information rather than being like, oh, so much to look at and I don't want to even read this. So work on the concise concept with this task. Also, this will have to be the final product when I see it for the first time. So do the revising before it comes to me. Have someone else look at it, see if there are errors, make sure that it looks nice, because it would be great if it was so well put together that you could start using it right away and be happy and proud to show it to future students. Okay, well, let's talk about the things for this class period. All right, new and transfer student interviews. I recommend doing this when you're first taking on a student or when you're trying to decide if you should take on a student. Oftentimes it's kind of a two-way street in terms of the interview. The teacher is interviewing the student to see if it's going to be a good fit, if they can get along well, if you feel like you have something to offer to that student. And it's also a little bit of an interview of the student and the parent, if they think that you and the student are going to be a good fit. So I think it works for everybody. They can see what you have to offer, what you're like, kind of get to know your studio and how it's run a little bit better. And so I recommend that. Let me just turn to the next page. Now the interview can kind of be like the first lesson, but it's going to follow these general things is what I would suggest. So these are the topics we're going to go through today. All right, so before you even have the interview with the student, you want to make sure that you have a few things worked out, that it's just going to be about 30 minutes, and that you're not requiring them to pay you for it. It's like a free trial lesson you may have heard before, and I think that really helps students and parents be interested and willing to try the lesson out with you and see if it works. And I would say be prepared to document the information that you learn at this lesson, because that's going to be a really good foundation for future lessons to come. Okay, now these are the questions that I think should be answered at this interview. And these are the questions that you are asking. So for example, should I take this student? Well, according to the interview, you have information to then decide if this is a good idea or not in the current situation. And the second question, is this student ready for lessons? I once started teaching a little 5-year-old not too long ago, and he was so excited about music and he had fun time at lessons, and it was fun to see that. However, he wasn't quite ready for lessons, I think, because he, there's the struggle between identifying right hand versus left hand. Also, the tension that he had, and then the focus and being able to remember concepts that I asked him to do, and for him to be able to apply them. Like, it just was difficult. We didn't make very much progress very quickly. And that's fine if you recognize that and you're willing to kind of work at that kind of 5-year-old pace. And there's some good method books out there, as you've studied, that are really geared towards this age group, and they move along very slowly, and that's just right for that age. So I guess depending on what you want to be doing in your studio, who you want to be teaching, you may just say, well, you want maybe a more regular pacing. So maybe this 5-year-old isn't ready, or maybe the 6-year-old isn't ready, or the 7-year-old isn't ready for the focus and practice or whatever. So you do need to consider this question. Number 3, what method books should I use with the student? Well, we've talked a lot about method books this semester, and I think you'll do a great job in deciding what kind of personality the student is and where their strengths and weaknesses are and what method could best help them. Okay. These are the questions that the student or the student's parents are going to be asking or wanting to know from you. So what is your teaching philosophy? What method books do you use? And do you have an emphasis in a certain area? Or in other words, why should they study with you? What do you have to offer that may be unique to you and not, offered everywhere with every other piano teacher? So an emphasis could look like you teach jazz, or you're really good with teaching little children beginners. Things like that. Or maybe you teach the intermediate or advanced levels really well, or something like that. So I would encourage you all to find an area of emphasis that you have, that you can really be like, this is something I do really well and unique to me and my lessons. Okay, so the general questions. Now this applies to both the new students, meaning those who've never taken lessons before, and the transfer students, those who have taken lessons before. And that's why I'm calling them general questions. All right, so of course you want to spend a little bit of time getting to know them. And this is where the documentation is useful, because you can use the information you know about them to help them in their learning and progression. For example, if a student loves sports, you can make sports analogies when you're teaching them musical concepts, perhaps about tempo or technique or things like that. But get to know them, help them feel comfortable. You get a sense for their personality and them get a sense of yours. And then I would always ask what their motivation is for taking lessons. Some will say that their parents are making them. And that's important to know, because if they're not really that motivated or excited, then you're probably going to have some difficulty in getting them to practice, or at least they won't be interested at the beginning in what you're teaching them and putting in the effort. So you will know that you're going to have to really try to engage them through their interests and make it fun for them and all that, to help them learn to get excited about it. Also, then of course you'll hear all sorts of other reasons, like I want to learn how to play hymns, I want to play hymns on my mission, I want to get really good, I want to be able to compose. You'll hear all sorts of reasons, and all that is really good info. I would ask what kind of instrument they have at home, or their piano quality, because it's interesting, but sometimes people want to take lessons and they don't actually have a piano or a keyboard at all. And if they don't, then you can say, I appreciate your interest. I would be happy to teach you once you acquire an instrument, because them practicing once a week on your own instrument doesn't make much sense. Also, some instruments are in really bad shape. Like they might not even have a pedal, or some of the keys may be broken, they don't even sound. These are struggles that will kind of be a detriment, a block in your student's progression. All right, now the practice environment. That, may be a little nosy, I suppose, but if you can kind of get a sense for what their environment is when they're practicing, or kind of educate the parent on what the practice environment needs to be, then that will help a lot to ensure that your student's going to be able to focus while they're practicing. Because if the piano's in a room where the TV's on all the time, or other kids are running around screaming, the practicing will not be very focused or effective. Now, the background. I think it's really important to find out what the student has been exposed to when it comes to music. Are there other people in the family that play music, whole instruments, or sing? Have they played another instrument before? Have they sung in choirs at school? Anything like that would be good to know, because then you know that they have some exposure, and hence their ear development has been happening a little bit, and etc. If they haven't had any exposure, then you're really going to have to start from ground zero and really work that ear development a lot, and probably the pulse a lot. Okay. So you need to know that about every student. Now we get to the division between the new student questions and the transfer student questions. I wish I could be there with you, and then we could do mock demonstrations of some of these little activities, but I will try to describe them as best as I can. So you want to make sure you've hit on each one of these to see where the student's at. Matching pitch, play a pitch on the keyboard and have them see if they can match it. If they can't, have them scoop up, like you play C, and then you go, see if the student can, because they'll sense and kind of feel and hear when it starts to vibrate at the same level. So scooping is a good way to help them match pitch if they're not getting it right off the bat. And if they're not getting it, there's a little bit of some real ear training that needs to happen to be able to distinguish between notes, because if they can't hear the difference between notes, they will also not be able to hear mistakes very well, or what sounds correct, right? Okay, rhythm. We've done a lot about rhythm activities. Just have them do a little imitation, and then, 1, 1, 1, 2. Now it's your turn, right? To see if they can stay steady, if they can remember the rhythm, if they can feel the rhythm. Now coordination, you could do things like right hand diz quarter notes, tap, 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 or maybe those are more like the half notes. Let's say half note, half note, half note. Now the other hand, tap, 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 quarter notes. Now have them do it together. Half note, beam, 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 beam. Something like that, where they have to now coordinate between the two hands. Obviously that can be developed, but if they're having a really hard time with coordination, that's something to be aware of. Now, reasoning, you can do just making sure they're ready, that they can go forwards and backwards in the alphabet, at least with those first few letters of the alphabet. And, like for example, start from 1 and count, but skipping every other number, and go up to 11 and come back down. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. 9, 7, 5, 3, 1, right? Because there's a lot of that sort of thinking and working when reading music, when playing music, with numbers and letters, backwards and forwards. And memory. Teach them something by rote and see how well they can respond and remember and imitate. Now, the transfer student, I may have to make a separate video for this little bit. I'll be back with you shortly.